Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tia Ravala and I'll be using this account to share sewing and DIY content. Today we're going to be making leather pants. Originally my plan was to recreate the Melina pants from Aritzia, but I fell in love with this red crocodile leather at Mood. It is fake crocodile leather, and I figured I'd go a more funky route instead. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit of information about the fabric I chose. To start with, I got 2 yards of fabric. I probably could have gotten a little bit less, but I wanted to have some left over to maybe work with on another project. I'd recommend getting 2 yards just to be safe, but if you're on a budget, maybe 1.5 yards should be plenty. And second of all, it's not stretchy. So for the pattern that I made, it doesn't need to be stretchy fabric, so keep that in mind. If it does have a little bit of a stretch, that's not a problem, but mine personally does not. All right, let's get to cutting the pattern.
So as you can see, I listed the measurements and different cuts I made. This pattern is based off of my body, which is roughly a size extra small. I do have a size inclusive pattern linked in the description as well as the comment section of this video, but I'd recommend making it in muslin before you make it in your actual fabric because I'm still learning how to convert sizes, and also the pattern's free, so keep that in mind.
Once all the pieces are cut, it's time to start sewing. To start with, we're going to take the pocket piece and the front piece and sew them together along this curve. It's important that the 2 front-facing sides go together, like this. Once that's complete, clip perpendicular to the stitch to make it easier to turn the piece inside out. You should do this step every couple of inches.
Once that's done, you should be able to flip the piece over so it lays somewhat flat. Usually this would be a point when making pants that I would iron it to lay extra flat, but due to the material not handling heat all that well, I won't be ironing it. I'm just going to add a top stitch along the curve. And to do that, you kind of just want to wiggle the stitch out. That way you can sew it down. You can pin it, but personally I just sew a few stitches and then adjust it again as I move along. I also added a second stitch about 1/4 inch over from the first stitch just for decorative purposes, but that's optional.
Once that step's complete, it should look something like this. Now, taking the remaining pocket piece, you should align this curve to the inner part of the pocket. The flap should align like this. Stitch along this curve,
and you'll have something like this. As you can see, the curve goes along the edge, and when you flip it over, the pant leg is complete. There's no longer that hole in the top hip. Next, you're going to add a basting stitch along the outer edge. It'll help hold the pocket in place while we sew the pant legs together.
Once that's complete, it'll look like this. Now, taking the front of the pant leg and the back of the pant leg, sew together along the inner and outer thigh. When you get to the crotch area, make sure you stop along this point and this point. Don't stitch anywhere along this curve because that's what we'll do in the next step. After sewing both pant legs, take one and turn it right side out like this and leave the other one inside out. Now, taking the inside out one, open up the top, then slide the bottom of the right side out one through the top. Do this until it reaches the bottom. Once it's inside, maneuver it so the back part of the pant legs aligns along the top edge. As you can see, the flaps go together.
Once the curves are aligned, we're going to sew from the back of the spine towards where the belly button would be, but we're going to stop when we reach the flap because that's where we'll add the zipper.
After sewing along that curve, turn the pants right side out. Now we're starting to have some pants. Okay, so now would be a good time to try them on. Something I should have mentioned earlier is I usually like to make pants a little bit bigger than I think I need them to be, just because it's easy to bring them in wherever you'd like to bring them in, but if you make them too small, you obviously can't go back. So as you can see, I didn't sew up this little flap right here because this is where the zipper is going to go. So to get a good idea of how the fit is going to be, I'm just going to pin up this flap. So now that I have them pinned up, I can get a better idea of the fit. I think now I'm going to bring in the sides a little bit right here.
And also add darts to the back.
And obviously it won't be puddling like this once we hem the bottom edge. Okay, so I turned the pants inside out and that made it a lot easier to pin them. So I pinned 1 inch on each side, and then I'm going to add darts to the back here. I was having a hard time marking them, or like pinning them rather, so I just used a marker to kind of like line up where I want to bring it in a little. But I'm going to do that and then get ready to add the zipper. Okay, so as you can see, I already brought in this side, but I haven't with this side yet, so it just gives you an idea of the difference, but obviously I still am going to do both sides. Okay, so now that I've made those alterations, I'm just going to sew up the fly. This will be a stitch that's removed later on, but it'll help us keep the zipper in place.
So I pinned along where we're going to sew. It's about 1 inch from the fly and basically a continuation of the curve that would have continued if it weren't for the fly. So now I'm going to open that up. Again, this would be a great time to iron, but since I'm working with a fake leather, I'm not going to do that. And now I'm going to take the zipper and turn it so the zipper is facing flat down, and then align the left side of the zipper to the stitch that we just made.
So now that I have the zipper pinned in place, I want to sew along the right side of the zipper, and I'm going to get as close to the zipper as possible without sewing through the other side of the pants. For this, I'm going to switch my presser foot to this tiny one. That way I can just get really close along the zipper.
Now that that's complete, I'm going to pull the left side of the zipper over to make it symmetrical to the right side and sew along the edge.
Okay, so now that I have the zipper sewn on each flap, I'm going to turn the pants inside out, or sorry, right side out. And then add a top stitch just along the curve. So typically on pants, it has this decorative top stitch. I'm just adding that, and I'm gonna do a double stitch just to imitate industrial professional pants. And just to be safe, I'm gonna pin where the bottom of the zipper is to make sure I don't go past it. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to remove the basting stitch from earlier, the one that we did along the fly that I said we would eventually remove, and we'll get to see how the zipper lines up. And for this, you can either trim it off or just use a seam ripper. Okay, great. So this is what it should look like at this point now. So as you can see, the zipper is in place, and now we're going to take these flaps that we cut out earlier to place them behind the zipper, because on regular pants, you wouldn't just have the zipper exposed because you don't want the zipper to be like too close to your skin. So taking these two pieces, we're going to put them face to face like this, and just sew around this edge, leaving the top part open up here so we can turn it inside out.
Once that's complete, you're going to turn it right side out. I might recommend doing this with a different fabric because the leather was difficult to turn right side out, and it also is not going to be super comfortable in the skin. But once I turned it right side out, I went and added a stitch along the edge to make it lay flat. Then I lined up the curve of this piece with the top stitch curve, the decorative curve that we did on the jeans, then sewed a straight stitch along the left side of the zipper.
Okay, so now that we have this backing piece, you can see they're a lot more comfortable and professional as well. So for the next step, we're going to be adding the waistband. And as you can see, this is a flat waistband. It's a long rectangle of fabric, and this will be perfectly fine if it was hitting this part of our waist. But since it's a little bit lower down, you can see it gapes at the sides a little bit. So I'm going to pin it about a 1/4 inch from the waist, from the top edge of the fabric, and then pinch in the sides a little bit. I'm gonna take off the pants to do that. Okay, yay! We are so close to being done, which is super exciting. But now that I've pinned this about a 1/4 inch again from the bottom, I'm going to fold it up, and this top edge is eventually also going to be folded in at a 1/4 inch. So just to kind of rough it out, I'm folding it down like that, and then folding the entire waistband in half, folding the two 1/4 inch edges together like this, and just roughly figuring out this edge. And once I have that, welcome to New York, the lovely sounds of New York. Okay, so now you can see the waistband is starting to come together.
I basically just pinned darts on the left and right side, as well as one down the back center.
And I also marked the point where it lines up with the zipper because I want to know where to start and stop the stitch. So now that that's done, I'm going to take them off and stitch this part right here.
So as you can see, I've pinned where I want to alter the sides and back. And now I'm going to remove the needle and just slide it through the top layer of the fabric. Once that's complete, I'm going to try to crease the edge because I want to keep that center line. Again, this would be a point when I'd usually iron, but I'm not doing that with this fabric. Then I'm going to flip it flat, and you can kind of see a diamond shape that's being formed. Then I'm going to fold on that crease line that I just created in the opposite direction with the two right sides of the fabric facing each other, and reinforce that diamond shape with pins so I'll be able to follow them when I sew. After sewing along that line where the needles were, I'm going to cut off the excess fabric, and you should be able to turn out your waistband where it looks like this.
So once you've added the darts to your waistband, it should look something like this. It'll vary depending on the shape of your body, but when you fold it in half, you'll start to see this curve, which should be a better fit than the original rectangle. And now, since I notched at the very back, which is like the center point of the waistband, I'm going to just pin the top edges of the pants. So as you can see, this is like right along the butt crack, and then the back together to make sure that it's centered. And now that I've pinned along that back dart, I'm going to just sew along the top edge, leaving about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that I've sewn the waistband onto the pants, you can see there's this raw edge that's exposed. And to hide that, I'm going to just fold this top edge down about
a 1/4 inch.
And then fold it onto the other section, and then add a top stitch right here. This part is a little difficult again because we can't really iron this material. So you're just going to have to either pin it a lot or really just move slowly.
So as you can see, I'm cutting off the excess fabric from the waistband, and then I'm folding that edge under, then folding a 1/4 inch down from the top and folding it into the inside of the pants. And usually I would just go ahead and add a top stitch to secure these pieces, but since I'm working with a somewhat difficult fabric, I decided to add a top stitch along the top of the waistband so it would lay flat while I add the other top stitch. So once I completed that, I folded the top edge of the fabric a 1/4 inch under, then added another top stitch to secure that piece.
So now that I've added the waistband, the only step left is to add the button and the buttonhole, and then add the back pockets if you're doing that. I'm going to be using this button that's basically a screw-in button. And I got it at Mood Fabrics, but I'm going to link the Amazon sale below.
So for adding a buttonhole, it might vary depending on machines, but for the most part, it's similar for most machines. So I have this buttonhole piece where I'm going to add the button so it knows the dimension that the hole needs to be. And then I'm going to switch it for my presser foot and slide this piece down. That way it knows the length and when to stop sewing. Then it just does it on its own. You basically select the buttonhole setting on your machine and you can see it just goes back and forth quickly and makes a hole. Once the hole is complete, you just need to cut the little slit out from the inside and your button should fit really nicely.
Okay, so this is the final pair of pants. I ended up deciding to leave the pockets off of the back just because I like the fit and I don't know, I really just didn't feel like adding them. But yeah, I'm really happy with how they turned out. They're super warm, which should be great for winter. And honestly, this is my first time making leather pants and it was difficult at times, but also really fun. And I think I'll get a lot of use out of them. So please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below and also let me know what tutorials you'd like to see next.